We are back with our NHL segment, and we are going to be talking about how the NHL playoffs are going to be going about. As yes, they are returned to play here at the end of July. So, for those casual NHL fans that don't know what's happening, how the NHL playoffs are going to work, they took a very, very different route, and they are going to make a 24 team playoffs. Yes, 24 teams. And so those 24 teams are going to be located in a similar bubble scenario that the NBA is following, except there's going to be two hub cities, and those two hub cities have been announced. I believe it is Toronto and Edmonton. So for the top four seeds, that's going to be Boston, Tampa, Washington, and Philadelphia. And the top four seeds in the West, the Blues, the Avalanche, the Golden Knights, and the Stars. What they're going to do, they're going to each play in a round robin to reseed each other. So, for example, if the Flyers are in fourth and they go 3-0, they could jump up to the 1 seed. And for 5 through 12 in each conference, they are going to be playing a best-of-5 game series within one another. And that's going to leave them with, I believe, that's going to narrow it down to 16. And then from there, it's just going to be best-of-5, best-of-7, until eventually we crown a Stanley Cup champion. And part of the reason why I like this system is the Blackhawks will be in the playoffs. They weren't supposed to. They will in this new format. So, Josh, what are your thoughts on this NHL's extremely unique playoff format?
I'm extremely excited to see how this will end up because it's so very different than every other playoff format that's, in American sports right now. And it's just it's going to be interesting. Hockey is already the sport with the most parity in the playoffs. Example, last year, the Blues being the 8th seed in the Western Conference and winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, if you look at every other sports league, I guarantee you the only other major sports league at least, where the worst seed won, that is the MLB and maybe the NFL. I think the Giants might have done it, but they were probably the number one wild card. Anyways, back on topic with the NHL, it's just going to bring another dimension of parity and another dimension of excitement to already the best playoffs in American sports. So I'm super excited to see how this format works, and I am happy to see the Hawks in, even though they definitely do not deserve to be there. As, again, being a diehard Hawks fan going to 2 games this year, it was incredibly obvious that this team is not very good. Robin Leonard was in net. This team was not very good. And, of course, you had to trade away Robin Leonard, who was one of my favorite players on the team. And, you got to trade away the better goalie who's younger and is also on a smaller contract. You got to trade that one to keep the older, injury-prone, worse, larger contract player. That's always what's got to happen, It's smart business moves. If you couldn't tell, that was extremely sarcastic. But I do feel like just like every other team, goaltending matters, and Corey Crawford, in the playoffs at least, and Corey Crawford is one who could turn it on in the playoffs.
Can he stay healthy, though? He has been able to turn it on in the playoffs with the past 2 to 3 years. He has not been able to stay healthy.
That's the question. That's why you got to keep someone like Robert Leonard.
As well, the Hawks will be getting Brent Seabrook back for the playoffs, which is
yippee-ki-yay, a 37-year-old old ass.
Okay, he has the playoff experience. He has won 3 cups with the team.
I liked Brent Seabrook, but playoff experience, my ass. If you can't skate faster than 2 miles
an hour, game manager.
He can't even do that well. That's
Timo Timonen role. Or Timo Timonen. I mixed up the letters there.
But
I don't know. I mean, it's not hurting him.
A very smart defender. He was always a big bruiser, and that's why he hit such a cliff over the past couple of years. But
all right, well, apparently Josh thinks the Blackhawks without Brent Seabrook are better than with Brent Seabrook in the playoffs. But here's what I think about the new 2014 playoff, and this is why I love it so much. Is it kind of reminds me, and this is going to sound insane, kind of reminds me of March Madness. It creates the Cinderella story. It creates the underdog team. There are 24 teams. That means that some of the teams are favored to win these first-round matchups more than others. The Oilers over the Blackhawks, the Penguins over the Canadiens. However, there leaves more room for more dramatic upsets. More dramatic than the Blue Jackets sweeping the Lightning last year, which was one of the greatest upsets of all time, in my opinion. I believe that some of these teams, Blackhawks included, with a lot of recent playoff experience, could potentially, in a 5-game series, upset some of these more talented on-paper teams. And who knows what can happen from there. So the NHL playoffs are already super exciting with already lots of, I think in the past 3 years, the Predators were like at the second wild card team. They got it to the Stanley Cup Finals. The Blues were like in last place. They ended up winning the cup. So you already have these deep playoff runs by underdogs, and just adding more teams just kind of builds on that legacy that the playoffs have. So I think it's just going to make it even more exciting. Personally, I think this is one of the best things that the NHL has ever done. I think it's super smart, and I think they handled this coronavirus the best out of all the leagues that are returning. They were smart. They moved to Canada. Canada knows how to run things. So
called a country.
Yes. And I don't think they have the least, but they have like approximately 30 players with coronavirus currently, which I mean, it's still good. It's still good. And their system is the same as everybody else. They have, just testing every day, testing multiple times a day, testing or COVID-19 medical facilities in the area, the usual. But yeah, I think this is super duper smart, and I think it's going to make me want to watch the playoffs even more, even with no fans, because I will say that the fans do play an important role.
Definitely. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things. Like the Winnipeg Jets last year, a couple years ago, when they went to the Western Conference Final, the whole thing was the whiteout. The whiteout at their arena. That was insane to watch. Jets games in the playoffs because just a sea of white. Everyone was into it, and that's the great thing about hockey is I feel like the fans, even though they don't have the most, they have the most die hard.
Yeah, I would definitely the most electricity. And my favorite hockey moment and one of my favorite sports moments of all time was last year in Game 7 between the Sharks and the Golden Knights when they had that super long power play and scored I think 4 in a row to be down 3-0 to go up 4-3.
Yeah, it was the
and for that 5 or 6 minute stretch, it was like the fans, every single fan in the building was on their feet screaming at the top of their lungs, even when they were just controlling it in the neutral zone. They just knew that they were just going to ride the momentum, and that electricity was just unmatched. So it will be different, but I mean, the NHL playoffs will still have that importance. Some of the teams to watch these playoffs, the St. Louis Blues, who were actually the number 1 team in the West, will be getting Vladimir Tarasenko back, who was out for the majority of the year with a shoulder injury, which is really important. He was their prime sniper in last year's playoffs. That is massive for the Blues if they want to make another playoff run. Tampa Bay, they just reload. Same with Boston. They have that. Line 1 with David Pastrnak, I believe his name is. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, I'm not the biggest hockey buff.
David Pastrnak is correct.
David Pastrnak is correct, and I'm trying. Brad Marchand. So yeah, they're still definitely stacked on paper. Josh, who are you? What are your thoughts on who could potentially go deep this playoffs?
Your point about Vladimir Tarasenko is incredibly great evidence that the Blues will win a back-to-back Stanley Cup, because they had 94 points, 42 wins, 19 losses, 10 OT, 10 extra points, which, by the way, is the second most wins in the NHL, or third most wins in the NHL, without their number one star. For, I'd say most of our fans would probably be basketball fans, because that's probably the most we talk about. And, obviously there aren't a ton. I mean, there are a ton, but there aren't, in comparison, as many NHL fans as are NBA fans. It's like, let's say this year, the Bucks decide to have the same record that they have this year, but without Giannis. So it's like, granted, Vladimir Tarasenko is not an MVP candidate. It's, it's just in relation to their team. Let me think. Luka Doncic. It's like how good the Dallas Mavericks would be. It's like if they were better than they were with Luka Doncic. It just doesn't make any sense. And then they get Luka Doncic. They get Vladimir Tarasenko back. So it's hard to bet against them when you have Jordan Binnington in net, and you just come back with another great star. And, players have increased, like Ryan O'Reilly and, Alex Pietrangelo. I'm bad at pronouncing hockey names, even though I'm a diehard NHL fan. But just so many good players. That team is just so deep.
Definitely. I did want to ask you one thing, because I have not been following the entire NHL, but when did the Avalanche suddenly become relevant? I knew that they were in the playoffs, but suddenly I'm looking here, and they were challenging the Blues for first in the Central.
Yes, they are. They actually are tied with the Blues for the most amount of wins. They literally just have one more loss than they do. I'm looking at their roster, trying to find out the name of the player, but I know Nathan McKinnon, and then one other player decided to become the absolute god this year. Even though they lost Philip Grubauer pretty early. Who was their, main goalie, pretty early in the season. There we go. Gabriel Landeskog. Gabriel Landeskog turned it on this year. Mikko Rantanen was insanely good this year. It was the other one I was looking for. Their defense is just extremely deep as well. And then, Philip Grubauer's injured. But Pavel Frankuzov, I think. Don't come after me. But for mispronouncing, but he's been decent in his replacement. That's why I'm nervous about picking the Colorado Avalanche. It's because Grubauer is still on the injury reserve. As we speak, I'm looking at the roster right now. He's still marked. And it's just, I can't say that they're going to win the championship because, they don't have that goaltending that you need to win a Stanley Cup. But this team's forward and, defensive depth just went through the roof, especially having arguably the rookie of the year after making the playoffs last year in Kale Maker, I'm pretty sure. I'm probably wrong about that, but he's been extremely good this year as a rookie.
So I'm actually going to go out on a limb here, and I'm actually going to go with the Pittsburgh Penguins. They will be getting Jake Getzel back. And I've been reading a lot about them. And they said they're mostly going to have to rely on experience, which I think in the NHL playoffs, experience does help. We saw it with the Capitals in 2018. And think about it. They have Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang as kind of like their old leaders that can still play. You know what I mean?
Right.
As well, they have Patrick Marleau, Jason Zucker. They're getting Getzelback, Connor Sheary. I think they have a chance. They weren't that far off from the Capitals. They were only 3 points off from the Flyers and 4 points off from the Capitals. And they were in a tight little. They ended up in the 5th spot in the East, so they will be having to play a first-round matchup. But they weren't that far from the top 4. I'm going to go with Pittsburgh. I think they can do 3 cups or. 3 cups in 5 years.
The concept of the Penguins is insane. The concept of the Penguins. Now you might be, what are you talking about, Josh? I know I'm delusional most of the time, but how do they go from Marc-Andre Fleury becoming one of the best, goalies in the NHL?
Excuse me. Yes, Matt Murray. I had totally forgot about him. I mentioned him. They have a super strong goalie. I know what you're going to say. Franchise goalie to franchise goalie. But continue.
Thanks for taking what I was going to say. But how do they go from one of the best goalies in the NHL, vie for, Stanley Cup winner, or not, Vezina Trophy winner, then all of a sudden he hits a wall, sucks, and just drops down out of nowhere for no reason. And then, they're just like, oh, we'll add in this guy named Matt Murray, hopefully he does all right, goes into the same position, becomes one of the better goalies in the NHL, and then, becomes one of the better goalies in the NHL, and then he hits another wall this year, and then they're just like, we're adding this kid, his name's Tristan Jarry, and then he also becomes one of the best goalies in the NHL. By the way, speaking of which, the goalies this year and just in general in the NHL in this modern age, there is a lot of good goalies. There are a lot of good
goalies
in the current day and age of the NHL. Like, I could list off 10 to 20 that are, I would say, above average of an average goalie. Obviously, you can't have 20 above average because that's not how numbers work, but it's just extremely insane at how deep, the goalie class, I would say, is. Goalie position is this year. So I do not blame you for choosing the Penguins, but I think I'm going to go with, I know this may shock you, the Dallas Stars.
I was actually thinking about them. I thought that was a bit too much of a stretch. The Stars, I can see it. I do respect that opinion. I do want to hear it, though.
Good forward
depth. The explanation.
They have such good forward depth. Arguably the best forward depth in the NHL. And it's insane. Their 2 goalies are both having Vezina Trophy caliber seasons. I'm not joking.
Yeah, I know. Ben Bishop and
Anton
Khudobin. Yeah.
They've both been having great years, which, by the way, it's kind of funny how they have one of the tallest goalies in the NHL, and Ben Bishop at 6'7", and then one of the shorter ones, and Anton Khudobin. But this team is just so good. This team is incredibly good. I really like Mikko Heiskanen. I really like him a lot. I feel like he's going to be a star a long time. You got Jamie Benn, even though he's older, he's still a decent player. Tyler Seguin's at the end of his prime, I would say. You have experience from Joe Pavelski and Ben Bishop. I just
Corey
like
Perry.
Corey Perry as well.
Ugh.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, depth. Their depth just is so incredibly good. And I
think it says something that we both pick very experienced teams.
Yes.
Like, I would say the Stars are a little younger, but they both, you said they're both like approaching in the back ends of their primes for sure.
And I think you said it. I don't think you brought it up, but I did. Is that we both pick teams with two very good goalies. Personally, my second, like one of my top three favorite teams in the NHL, because I love Darcy Kemper, is the Coyotes. But I just don't think they have the defensive fortitude to last. They have the forwards, they have the goalies, but they don't have the defense. That's why I'm going with the Stars, because they have that defense replacement. So that's my pick to win the Stanley Cup. I think the Stars will finally end their drought. Granted, it's not that big of a drought, just since like 1999 with the no goal game. But you know, it is what it is. I'm super excited to see what happens. There's going to be a ton of parity, but you know, don't be quoting us too hard on the predictions, because no one's ever predicted the Stanley Cup champion, you know, correct? Because there's so much parity. That's obviously a joke, but it's just extremely hard because there's so much parity. Like
I do want to know, what were the Lightning's odds to win it last year?
Last year it was like 2-1 or something insane.
And they got swept in the first round. That's NHL playoffs. That is the NHL playoffs in a nutshell.
My dad told me this last year. I don't remember why I remember it, but if you bet on the Stars last year, you would have lost money. Lost money.
The Stars or the Lightning?
Sorry, Lightning last year. You would have lost money. That's how much of a favorite they were. If they won the Stanley Cup and you bet on them, you would have lost money.
You know, shout out to the guys that bet on the Blue Jackets to win. Probably rich as hell.
That series. Wow. They must have made a lot of money.
Yeah.
I will, speaking of Blue Jackets, I want to give a quick shout out to John Tortorella, because of course he's watching this video. Another sarcastic comment. I just want to make sure that is clear, that I'm an extremely sarcastic person. So I don't get, you know, bashed in the comments for, you know, wow, this guy thinks he's so famous he can reach an NHL coach. No, I don't. John Tortorella, if you're watching this video, props to you, man. Props to you. You beat the Tampa Bay Lightning last year, and then you go on in the offseason and you lose your top three free agents. You lose Artemi Panarin, Matt Duchene, and Sergei Bobrovsky. Mispronunciation again. You know, fun times with Josh over here and not speaking English. And you somehow still produce a playoff caliber team when you lose your top three stars. That is insane. Just props to you. I just wanted to say that, as you can now finally wrap it up, Gavin.
Awesome. Yes, that will conclude our NHL segment. This should be fun. I'm not going to lie. This is going to be a lot of fun to watch this summer. Obviously, they're going to be competing with two other sports, but hey, 3 sports on at once is much better than no sports on. So, yeah, that's going to be it. See you guys later. Tune into the next episode.
Thank you for watching.